I want to thank you once again, and I want to tell you that I really appreciate your expertise because what you are bringing to the table, I think, is beyond what most people think of resilience. Most people think of resilience as just personal grit. Well, yeah, we're talking about personal grit to the nth degree. I mean, Jose, you were kept hostage for 5 years. Now, that requires grit to survive that. I mean, I was kidnapped and kept hostage for just 3 days. I mean, we're still kind of a minority of the few humans that experienced it on our own skin, and we survived to tell the story what it was like to be a hostage. But that is an amazing resilience at a completely different level. And Larian, thank you for being here. It's great to connect with you, and you are representative of a national resilience of the First Nation, or the nation that has been around for much longer than the United States of America or many other countries around. And this is fantastic. I'm honored to have you here. And Dr. Simeon, you are a legend in your own right, having worked with a number of special forces and having done some work with the Canadian government at the top secret level. So you're like the Superman among us. So welcome. And
well, thank you, but I don't know that I deserve the Superman epithet compared to what Jose has gone through or many others here.
You're James Bond of sorts. Anna, would you give me a power cord to power up my computer? Thank you. Yeah, so who would like to share about your take on what it's like to be an expert, or what it's like to even think about national resilience? Because a lot of people don't really think about this type of things. Unless you're a statesman or politician, you often don't even consider what it's like to be a resilient nation, or what it's like to make your nation resilient. So
let me say something. Let me say something, because I was talking with Dr. Simeon a little bit about that, because when I went through this situation and I came back, the first thing is that I was not aware about this situation. I thought that was my case, that I had this weird situation, but I discovered that this is something that is really worldwide. It's something that's happening in many countries, because many of these, what I call these evil regimes, they do this like a very sophisticated way of doing diplomacy, taking people, normal people that maybe have some kind of high profile, and they use them as a pawn. And this is not only here in the US, this is happening in many countries. I was telling Mr. Simeon that there are two famous cases in Canada that they call them the two marks. There were two guys that were in a trip in China, and finally they were swapped by one of the vice president of one of the big telephone companies of China, something like that. And you can find, by the way, in California are like 2 or 3 famous cases that recently there were released, from one from China, one from Russia, and the other from but that common trend, because I got connected to that community. One of the common trends and the people that go through this situation is that they develop a strong resilience. Not only them, their families, because in my particular case, my family, when I was during my captivity, they created a campaign. They created a campaign that became national. The campaign, they got connected to other families in other countries going through this, and they created a campaign that today still exists, that is called the Bring Your Family Home campaign. And this campaign, when I began to get involved with them and saw all the families, the work they were doing, it's incredible how the human normal people can really create that strong resilience, endure it, and do things beyond the normal thing that you can think you can do it. And today I talk about the human nature. You have in your an inner force. Everybody has that inner force that you don't know that you have it there. But so when you go through an extreme situation like this, is where you can unleash it. Sometimes you do it in a I don't know, in a particular way because you have some kind of a characteristic that you can do it. But you can be trained to do this. You can develop this I call it the unbreakable spirit. That is something that no matter what you're going through, you can overcome anything in life, and you can do things beyond what you really can think about. That was what I wanted to share.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jose. This is absolutely true that we do have indomitable spirit. Most of us do. And for most people, they don't have, they have not experienced enough suffering to awaken that spirit. Now, it may sound really weird to hear that from a Buddhist. You hear it from a Tibetan Lama, right? People need more suffering. Most Buddhists would be like, no, we need less suffering. We need to go to nirvana. I'm like, no. Have you ever heard of anyone who achieved any degree of enlightenment without having gone through a tremendous amount of suffering? It is imperative. It is a requirement for enlightenment. It's just hopefully some of us have experienced enough suffering in past lives, maybe, and now we don't have to. But if we haven't, okay, well, we still have a chance in this lifetime to experience enough suffering to actually become more enlightened. And I'm not talking about enlightenment as like some kind of a lofty status that you once reach and you've enlightened for the rest of your life. It's a sliding scale, and you can easily backslide after most profound awakenings, fall back asleep. So then the journey is to become more and more awake and to remember what it's like to awaken and develop certain triggers that help you become more awake. And often those triggers, again, are not pleasant. They are actually associated with some degree of pain and suffering. Those of us who learn how to be able to handle those kind of triggers develop the ability to awaken on demand. Those of us who have not experienced enough suffering try to shy away from it or run away screaming. They're like, no, we don't want any of that. Okay, well, then there goes your indomitable spirit back to sleep. So it sounds rather harsh, and maybe you may think, oh, he's talking like this because he was a special forces sergeant. Yeah, I was a drill sergeant in special forces. So I'm not a particularly pleasant guy when it comes to, instilling a resilience in someone. But I can also be a very pleasant and polite guy when I'm not working with developing that kind of resilience. And what I'm personally working with, and that's my challenge I'm sharing with you in full transparency, is that how to combine the best of both worlds. How can I be a really nice guy and still help people develop greater resilience? So I'm here to learn from you folks. Maybe you can enlighten me. Maybe you can just give me a role model of that. I see Simeon is turning your mic on, so please speak up.
Well, I was just thinking as you were talking about that, if we wanted to transpose what you were saying to this level of national resilience, there is the saying, something to the following effect, that soft people create hard times. Hard times create hard people. Hard people create good times. Good times create soft people, and the whole cycle continues. Is it true or not? Not sure, But you do get the point, and I think there is a point to it. If we look at what our ancestors went through, even my parents' generation, because my parents were 40 when I was born, and that was like 300 years ago. So
You're
they,
not that old, are
these were people who lived through, who remembered the Great Depression. They remembered the Second World War. They remembered how close, especially being in Canada, being part of the British Commonwealth, not being in the United States, they were very conscious of how close civilization came to collapse in the Second World War. And yet these were people who managed to keep going. So you get the sense right there. They were a tough bunch.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I would imagine that you would be able to also share some of your approaches, because I remember from your bio that you have done some work with some special forces or some other operatives in Canada and Israel and some other countries, maybe. So, without divulging any state secrets, perhaps you can share with us some of the nuggets of what helps those folks become particularly resilient, and what is it that we as now civilians can do to boost our grit as well.
Well, I mean, the training of people in special forces is of course well known, and pretty brutal, especially at the outset. When they're going through, things like Navy Hell Week is, of course, legendary. Delta training far less well known, deliberately, and things like that, or the British SAS training, their selection process as well. And there's a lovely quip from the British SAS selection process. Something apparently this actually happened apparently. So somebody comes into for selection process. He's British, already a British soldier. He's in really good shape. He thinks he's an Iron Man, and so he comes up to the sergeant major and starts bragging about how good he is and what a pushover this whole Hell Week is going to be. And the sergeant major, he says to the sergeant major, something like, "Oh, I can run 100 miles." And the sergeant major just looks at him and says, "Well, good for you. Let's see if you can do that when your socks are wet." The idea being, in perfect conditions, we can all perform really well. But when things get really uncomfortable, when your socks get wet and they wind around your foot and you get blisters, let's see how far you're going to go, because then it's not physical. Everybody knows everybody who comes is going to have a high physical fitness level. We're not looking for that. We want the people who can go through despite the pain. And this, but this transfers as well to the same, kind of domain that you and I have taught in with respect to traditions of energy work and meditation, like Qigong, and whether Taoist or Buddhist, and even to the ancient Christian tradition, which I spent many decades in. That even the spiritual training is absolutely brutal when you get right down to it. I was on Mount Athos back in the 90s and end of the 90s, and Mount Athos is the largest community of Eastern Orthodox monastics in the world, and it's the ancient Christian mystical tradition. What these Olympic athletes could not follow these guys around, and I swear to God that's absolutely true. These guys were like 80 and 90 years old, but the average person could not do with that little food, that little sleep, and still getting that much exercise.
Yeah.
And it's like this all over the world. That's not different from the way traditionally Taoists were trained, Buddhists were trained, right? And you know that very well. So it's part of the problem here, I find, is that when we share things from the traditions that we are familiar with, whether it's, Qigong or Tai Chi or whatever, getting people to do the work is very difficult.
They need to want to do the work. If they don't want it, getting them to do it is almost futile, especially when it comes to personal development. You know, you can bring the horse to the water, as they say, but you can't make it drink. And, you know, those monks too. I don't know much about the Eastern Orthodox Christian monastic tradition, but I'm very familiar with the Buddhist tradition. I was ordained as a monk in the Thai tradition in Theravada, in Japanese Nipponjin Mehoji, and in Tibetan tradition of Nyingma. So I kind of been with them all. I'm like a spiritual whore. And so they all have certain ordeals that they put the novice monks through. And for me, it was almost boring. It was not an ordeal. It was like too easy. And everyone was like, what was wrong with you, man? How is it that you're bored? And I was like, well, if you go through special forces training, this is nothing. And on the other hand, that's probably why I decided not to live in the monastery, because it was just not enough stimulation for me. You know, there are different people, and some people have, you know, like a high threshold for stimulation. And so for them, they need more stimulation. Otherwise, they're bored or just fall asleep. And so some people like that become adrenaline junkies. Some people become, you know, Formula One drivers, and some people join the UFC. I decided, you know, I don't want to be in the UFC, but I'm definitely interested in finding people who already have this type of indomitable spirit awakened to some degree, and bring these people together into a community. It's going to be a rowdy bunch. I know that, because every time people have this kind of indomitable spirit awakened with them, they don't really subscribe to authority. I don't want to create an authority. I'm not a cult leader. I want to create a community of kindred spirits who are really interested in making our world a better place through becoming more resilient and helping other people live more resilient lives. Now, and some of you may be familiar with the idea of community building from a different perspective. Ilarian, for example, you may be familiar with the idea of community building more on a level of your traditional tribal life, and how things are going on the Aleutian Islands. I have no idea. I have never been. So maybe you can enlighten us a little bit how you guys do it.
Yeah. Kasu the Angwan, I said the morning tastes good, which is the way we greet each other every day. It's morning here. And I said, hello, my other self, which is another way we greet each other every day. I am Unungen. We don't use the word Aleut because that was given to us by our former oppressors. We use another one for the people by the sea, and we've been in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years, and we're still there. And my people have a remarkable history. We have stories about coming out of Egypt, going to Outer Mongolia, to Siberia, to Kamchatka, and across by traditional craft, not by the Bering Land Bridge, as most people theorize. And we have a legacy that our ancestors have given us, that being present in the moment and in the heart, with the knowledge that everything else will be taken care of. So as a result of that, my people never planned where they were going to get the food the next day. We just were present in the moment and in the heart. And as a result of that, we had the most densely populated linear mile of shoreline in all of North America for our time. And most people are into planning and being present in the moment and in the mind. and it is opposite in my culture. I have a name called Kuya, which was given to me by the last Kuya that was left alive amongst my people. At 4, I was given that name at 4 years old, and it means like an arm extending out from the body, the carrier of ancient odds into modern times, a messenger. So I've been living the legacy of my name. I'm now going to be 76 years old. It's been quite a journey because my people, besides having a rich culture, also were slaves of the U.S. government. Most people don't realize that. We were kept as a captive labor force to kill first northern fur seals for their pelts. And the government owned and controlled everything amongst my people. They controlled the food. They gave us rations of food. They controlled the housing. They controlled even the clothes that we wore. And protests were dealt with harshly. It would be jailing or cut down of the rations for food or for heat that affects your entire family. And in the worst cases, the man was deported off the island to the Aleutian chain without his family. And so we have that legacy, and we're still here. And we are still very vibrant in what we do. Now, I, among other things, I am the chief spokesperson for the Wisdom Weavers of the World, which are elders from throughout the world, spiritual elders. And we met in Kauai in 2017. Now, if you're interested in them, we can go to www.wisdomweavers.world, and you will find out about what we do, which is to spread the word, because the elders are saying, all these elders, they're saying that Mother Earth is going to exercise her powers much more vigorously than ever has been in human history. And it's going to happen in our lifetime. And that we are worldwide focused on the mind, which is center of logic and rationality. But traditionally, heart used to tell the mind what to do. And the mind's job was to implement that which your heart is telling you. And now it's totally reversed. And so the elders say this is why we have all the grief in the world that we have today. We must be able to go to the heart and listen to the heart to tell you what you must do. And they're saying that the people, I met once with Don Alejandro, who was the keeper of the day calendar for the Mayans. We spent a week together, and at the end, he said, we're going to go through some very hard times. And the people that are going to negotiate this time the best, are going to be people of the fire, which means people of the heart. And so the Wisdom Weavers, the people,
We are losing you. The internet connection is not so good.
Okay. Sometimes I'm in Alaska, so sometimes the internet is lousy.
Right.
But anyway, they're saying that we have a gift. Each one of us us in the world has a gift to give to the world if we can access our hearts. And of course, as you know, accessing and listening to your heart is very difficult to do. But the elders are working at that to help people access their hearts.
Marvelous. Excellent. Thank you so much. That is definitely a great message. I think the people of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska in general are probably some of the toughest in the world because, as you just said, they traveled from Mongolia and other parts of Central Asia and center of the Eurasian continent, from the steppes and deserts of like Gobi, and went through the taiga, which is the dense forest in the eastern part of Siberia, and then ended up in tundra. And for some reason, they just kept going. And then they actually ended up in the New World, whether or not they traveled by boat or they walked across the Bering Strait when there was a land bridge there. Either way, they ended up in Alaska. And some people were like, this is really cold and unhospitable, so we need to keep going. So they kept going, ended up in Western Canada, and eventually, well, back then there was no Canada to speak of, but that part of the world in North America where Canada is now, and then went further down south to where the United States are now, and then kept going further. And the further they went, the nicer the weather was, at least it was warmer. And then so eventually they ended up going all the way to South America. Of course, some of them ended up going all the way to Tierra del Fuego Island. That's not particularly hospitable either. But some decided we're going to stick around. Alaska, cold, ocean everywhere, or high mountains. We're going to stick around. We're going to stay here. We like it here. And those are some tough people. So I'm really honored to have you here, Larry. This is really amazing. And I also would like to give you, Sheldon, the soapbox. Share with us a little bit about your perspective on national or global resilience.
Yeah, it's interesting. You had mentioned Buddhism, and maybe the perspective now is about not suffering, and the view that I hold is that it's not about stopping suffering, because that's impossible. It's about suffering consciously as opposed to unconsciously. And that's kind of the major difference. And transformation can happen through that awareness, not through falling asleep to the suffering or going to some Zen idea of Zen in the mind. And so a lot of the things that I've found has been more like misconceptions of concepts, more so than anything, I guess. And I think about even my history, my ability to be here on this planet as a human being is a story of resilience in and of itself. As a lot of Black North Americans, we are many of us are mixed with not just the African, but the indigenous folks here. I'm also part Choctaw Native American, and so my family had to deal with the Trail of Tears on top of the fact of enslavement. Enslavement was only 5 generations from me, so it's not abstract. My family knows the family that basically enslaved them. So I have names, receipts. So these histories aren't to be forgotten, even though I think there's a large push to forget history. But then when you do that, it just rhymes, that cycle that Dr. Simeon was talking about. And so I think, again, suffering consciously, it's not to like deny, or let's not think about, let's not talk about those things. It's like, actually, let's engage and really understand what those things are, so that we can avoid some of those things. But also, how do we keep our grit? There's things that my grandparents could do with medicine and pickling, preserving foods that, you know, the younger generations have no idea about because they never had to. Right? They have refrigeration, they have all of these different things. So there isn't a need to do that. So I think a lot of global resilience actually does start at the personal level. How do you instill that in the new generations? How do you teach them about the past? How do we keep certain things active in them so that when times get tough, they have the tools, as opposed to, oh, let's just stick our head in the sand and pretend that the world around us isn't happening.
Right on. And you also have a profound amount of training in martial arts and meditation, studied with Shaolin monks, not to mention studying with me. And that's something that I think also contributed to your level of grit and understanding. So I just wanted to give you the kudos for being such a persistent force in this field, because a lot of people try, dabble, and run away because it's too tough, especially when you start teaching. People think, well, when I start teaching, then it's going to be easy. It's actually the other way
harder. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I think is funny, this is a conversation with a lot of my other martial arts masters friends that really teach the real art, is that you'll empty out your school immediately when you start teaching real martial arts, and people want to be coddled. Even MMA has figured out that people actually don't want to do MMA. The amount of people that want to do that is a very small amount that are willing to go through that punishment. So what they actually teach is cardio kickboxing. Same thing with Krav Maga. You see a lot of people doing Krav Maga Fit, and they're not doing Krav Maga at all. But they feel confident about what they're doing. And so I understand that. And as a business, that's an excellent business model. But as actually teaching people the real skills, it's really rare that people want to intentionally go through that.
Exactly. And I think if we look back at one of my favorite sayings from Bruce Lee, the guy was obviously famous and obviously was considered is considered one of the most impressive martial artists of our times. And he had some very simple saying. He said, "Don't pray for an easy life. Pray for strength to deal with a hard one." Now, it goes back to the exact same approach to what Dr. Simeon Roger was talking about, how easy times make soft people. And so what can we, as the harbingers of resilience, as the people who are kind of on the cutting edge of this movement, do to contribute the development of greater grit, not only among individuals who study some martial arts with us, but individuals all over our nations and our entire world, other than during the summit? Obviously, this is something that I hope is going to contribute, but maybe there is something else that we can do that would also be beneficial. Any ideas? No ideas. Simeon, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take a plunge here, and I'm going to take it a little bit away from the physical for just a minute, because we can go down that path. I know, and I totally agree with you, Sheldon. I've often heard it said, martial sports are very popular, martial arts not so much, which explains why you can fill a Taekwondo studio and not something that's going to teach the hard stuff. But one of the areas that's a real problem for national, or I would call civilizational resilience, is in the mind. that people are so easily manipulated and so easily misled and so easily propagandized. And with the amount of crazy disinformation around us that people sometimes swallow hook, line, and sinker, it's, I think, one of the facets of resilience, if we really want to talk about it on the level of a whole society, is, you know, getting people to the point where they can distinguish what is true and what is false. And, you know, while we could go on down a metaphysical road path about how you would do that, the simple fact is that it's, you know, the problem isn't just that people don't know what to think. They no longer know how to think. They no longer know how to look at something, evaluate, and analyze. And, you know, in our sort of line of work, you know, the kind of things where we talk about Tai Chi and Qigong and meditation, we are not always very kind to the rational mind. We, you know, much like Hilarion, we're more focused on the heart, and that's all great. But there is something to be said for being able to look at facts, and facts actually do matter. So how do we get people, you know, back to a place where they actually know how to think, and where the educational system actually will help them learn how to do that instead of just doing whatever passes for education these days.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of education, we will have an opportunity to enjoy the presentation by Bill Douglas, who happens to be the founder of World Tai Chi and Qigong Day that we celebrated yesterday, our professional holiday. But now he's also the founder of what he calls the Global Transformation Project. And that's what he's talking about, bringing Qigong and similar disciplines, whether it's yoga, whether it's meditation, or other similar practices, into schools. So basically, he's trying to push this agenda of educating children from a relatively young age to think for themselves, to become more self-empowered, and also to develop greater sense of resilience. And I think that's a pretty cool message. So I think we're going to have some interesting things to learn from what he's bringing on the table. Michael, you're raising your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes, sort of along those lines. I've been doing a lot of research and practicing. I do a lot of walking meditation. So I have, right now, I'm putting out to my community and I'm putting out flyers, and I'm doing a 6-week challenge. So I want people to do 1 hour a week in the woods, if they can, barefoot, and no music, no dog walking, no talking to anybody. Just immerse yourself in nature for 1 hour a week, and do that for a period of 6 weeks. And then at the end, if you want to go farther, give me a call. But I'm reading right now Earthing. So I've created a therapy now called Medical Qigong Forest Therapy. So that mixes grounding, medical Qigong, and forest bathing all in one. And I teach people how to do that for themselves. The Qigong is like, it's spiritual. Like if you have emotions that you want to get out. And for me, I've always found comfort in the ocean and the forest. And with that, I study, Madeline is a lady that studies Tree Gong. So have you ever meditated in the forest?
I lost you. Does everyone hear Michael or? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I hear him.
To make it short, I just want people to go into the forest barefoot. So if you know Tai Chi, do Tai Chi in the forest barefoot, and the amount of energy and power, and it's gonna open you up, so you can align yourself with making the right decisions for you. I think people need this stage because we're so disconnected on so many different levels that people need to figure out themselves before they can fully love and help others. But that's all I have to say. I'm just doing a 6-week challenge. So And the 6 week starts whenever you see my posting. There's going to be a few people that embrace this, that like people can cure themselves of all their different ailments if they just embrace this. But they won't until they try to do it. So that's why I'm gentle about it, but I'm just putting a challenge out. And once they do it, it'll change some people's lives. So
Yeah,
that's my
6
part.
weeks.
So,
Thank you. Yeah, and 6 weeks is a good chunk of time. They say that it takes 100 days to change a habit. Well, 6 weeks is even, what is it?
I think it's
It's a
21
little
days.
bit less than that, but
Yes, 21 days.
it's just
20
enough
20
to give them a taste.
Hmm.
And the few that will embrace it, they will see noticeable differences just by grounding themselves in nature for an hour. And those are the people that God will shine through, and they will tell their story. And that's how it starts. I plant a lot of seeds, mustard seeds. I'm just a farmer.
cool. Thank you.
So thank you.
Awesome. And where are you from, by the way?
I live in Campbell River, which is North Vancouver Island, Canada. I have ocean and mountains. I'm here, and there's a reason why I'm here too, as well, for this town. Just how I'm channeling it. But it's a beautiful place, and the energy is incredible. So, and no one knows what Qigong is, let alone medical Qigong. So I get to have fun.
Right on.
And I
Great.
was doing Qigong yesterday at the Spit, which is in the ocean, by the ocean. So I had 6 people join me.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah. Yesterday was the day when a lot of Qigong and Tai Chi and other teachers of these disciplines did various types of demonstrations. Of course, during the pandemic, it was not optional to do demonstrations face to face. So a lot of folks transitioned to doing it online, and they just kept doing it online because, well, it's easier and you don't have to travel far. But I think there is also a lot to say about face-to-face interactions. Otherwise, we start losing our social connections. Ilarion, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, well, I agree with Michael that being out in nature is very important. One of the things that unanimously the elders around the world that I work with say is that business as usual is not going to work. We have had, thousands of more environmental organizations in existence today than were 30 years ago. But yet, Mother Earth's support systems for humans is coming to the edge right now. That's what they're saying. And that what we have to do is really go to the heart rather than think about what species I'm going to save or anything like that. We don't have time. They're saying we do not have time. There are going to be great changes during our lifetime. And Mother Earth, she survived for billions of years. She's going to survive for billions more. She doesn't need us. But she does want us to focus on becoming what we call a real human being, which is simply a person present in the moment and in the heart. And, I can tell you from my own personal experience that being in the heart is always impeccably right. It has kindness, it has patience, it has love, it has all these things that human beings are seeking. But yet, this is something that very rarely is talked about in open public forum. We need to, we've got to step up to the plate right now. That's what these elders are saying. Now, one of the things that the Colombian elders are doing, they recently created a National Council of Spiritual Elders, and it's composed of 105 tribes and over 500 members. And they unanimously agree that that the world is surrounded by a consciousness that takes us to the mind and only in the mind. And that to counter that, they are asking all indigenous people of the world to focus, to synchronize their ceremonies, to focus on creating this a band of love around Mother Earth. This goes beyond quantum physics. And when we have that love, energy, vibration, if you will, in existence, it gives people an opportunity to choose what they want to do. Go to the death consciousness or go to the life consciousness.
Brilliant. Well, indigenous people of the world know some things that people who live in first world countries have forgotten. And I'm so happy that you're bringing forward this message and sharing it with everyone. I think a lot of folks who live in the first world countries just simply need to reconnect with nature, reconnect with Mother Nature, as well as with our inner nature. Like you said, the heart is always right. Well, I don't know if it's always right, but the inner nature definitely can tell us what we resonate with and what we don't, and how much we resonate with something. And so the more we switch to making our decisions based on energy resonance principle, rather than a judgment of what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's bad, the more we'll be able to perform at a much higher level of intelligence. Because, at least in my humble opinion, it's the most intelligent way to make decisions on the basis of energy resonance. And that creates freedom from labels, including the labels of good and bad. And so I literally stroke out of my vocabulary those words. Not that I can't say them, but I don't use them in my daily life. At no point in time am I actually using the words, this is a good thing or this is a bad thing. This is a good person or this is a bad person. I just simply don't operate in this way. And guess what? It gives me the ability to live in paradise. You know, I'm not Christian, so I don't really know a lot about the Christianity. But what I do know is that there's a story about Adam and Eve somewhere in the Bible, right? And how did they live in paradise? They lived in harmony. They lived in harmony with themselves, with each other, with the powers that be, and the whole world around them. And then they get kicked out of paradise. How did that happen? Well, they actually ate the fruit. The fruit of what? The fruit from the tree of knowledge. What was the knowledge of? That was the knowledge of good and evil. And that means that basically they got indoctrinated, or they got poisoned by this virus of the mind that separates everything, polarizes things into black and white. And as soon as the human consciousness operates in this way, there is no way to be in peace. There is no way to stay in harmony with the paradise. So they got kicked out of it. They were no longer connected to the powers that be. They were no longer connected to each other. They, in other words, lost their true nature. It's not really lost, it got obscured by this filter of perception, if you will, a polarizing filter. And so the more we learn how to remove this filter, the more we're capable of connecting with the true essence of things, which is all energy, and it all has different frequencies of vibration, as you said, Ilarion. And so then the more we are in touch with those things that we resonate with, the more we experience the sense of flow. And that's what I personally find most beneficial. It's like holy grail of old Qigong and other disciplines like this, the art of being in a flow. So that's what I teach in
Yeah.
practice.
My mother said, we cry when a baby is born and we celebrate when they die. The reason for that is, of course, before we're born, we are a formless form. And we come into a dense form of a human being, and we're going to encounter all the things a human being encounter, and so we cry for the baby. When they die, they go back to their original free form. Now, the way that I was raised was that I had to watch, listen, and learn, not ask any questions. Just watch, listen, and learn. The adult's job was simply to create the space for a child to learn, not tell them what to learn, how to learn, or to define anything. So I grew up not asking any questions. And this is what brings us the intelligence that we need to deal with the issues that human beings have created now around the world. And unless we do this, we're done for.
Yep, there's that. Well, I would love to continue chatting with you guys. Also, Jeff, I haven't touched base with you. What would you like to share with us if you feel like sharing anything?
Yes, I would actually. I really resonate with Ilarian's message of sending love out to the world. And in some of our shamanic circles that I participate in, that's one of the things we do is we go for national or world healing exercises where we basically just send love out to people, to nations, to cities, to places that need it. And, in order for us to shift everything, we somehow need to reach a tipping point of enough individuals that develop the resilience. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how to do that. But we are swinging on a pendulum, and our society, our nation, our world seems to be moving toward chaos at the moment. And yes, there's a lot of people that don't think. They can't think. But as we move more and more into chaos, those people are going to start feeling more pain, because there's going to be financial pain, there's going to be social pain, and all sorts of discomfort. And somehow, I don't know how to do it, but somehow we need to advertise on a mass level to encourage people to move toward this resilience that we're talking about. And like I say, I'm baffled on how to do that. I mean, this is one forum that I think is fabulous, but it's a small forum. I mean, if we could do this on national news and get millions of people to look at it and start thinking about it, and I know a lot of people don't even want to think, but somehow we need to even get them to want to think. As
Thinking
first,
is hard. That's why most
yeah,
people judge.
yeah, and to feel their pain and to look for a solution to that pain that would move them toward enlightenment. And it's a massive undertaking, and somehow we need to figure out how to do that before we just totally destroy the entire civilization. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, and destruction of civilization is something that we as human species have probably experienced more than once. I mean, I'm an anthropologist by education, and I studied a variety of different civilizations that existed in various parts of the world, anywhere from Africa to Papua New Guinea. And there were civilizations that I explored, some in Polynesia and Guam and Chuuk and other countries. And I've been to the cities that were carved out of rocks, both in Bali and in Central Asia and in Crimea. They were ancient and they existed as civilizations, and then something happened to the civilization. Same thing happened to the North World, to the New World in Central America. There were numerous civilizations, Mayans, Aztecs, Toltecs, and others that basically came and went. What happens? Some other civilization will come along. And if we don't get attached to the idea of preserving this civilization by every means possible, then we don't suffer the demise of the civilization so much. Basically, the attachment is one of the main causes of suffering. Attachment and aversion. So if we develop freedom from attachments and aversions, which is what we call equanimity, we can actually live suffering free even when the civilization goes to shit, which it always does. So we just simply accept it as part of the natural cycle of things and don't fret too much. Now, civilizational resilience, as Dr. Simeon was presenting in his presentation, is something that we have to figure out how to do, because not everyone is going to be as zen about it as me.
Yeah.
Well, it brings up the question, doesn't it, that does human advancement have to take place by monumental crisis? Do we have to hit rock bottom before we can get to the next level, or is there a way to evolve steadily? And it's a good question, and sometimes it may be historically a bit of both.
Yeah, well, many people around the world share pretty much the same stories about these times. And we are in the fourth world, they call it, the fourth set of people that are in existence today. There were 3 others before us, and it goes back hundreds of thousands and thousands of years. And that today we are moving into the fifth world. Some people say we're going to the sixth world. But these worlds are the consciousness that is in existence during that time. And 3 other civilizations in the world failed. They failed because they did not, they left the heart of their hearts. And that, I hope, I'm trying to drop that you are able to get to a point where you realize that the heart never guides you wrong. It always guides you impeccably right if you are listening to it. And that, it will give us the answers we need now, this time, for this fifth world. If we don't get these answers from our hearts and you come from the mind, it's not going to work. That's what I think.
Yeah, well put. Thank you. Yeah, well, any questions, any comments, folks? We have quite a few people who are participating with the cameras turned off. If you have any questions, feel free to turn your camera on, switch your mic on, and fire away. We're happy to answer any questions if there are any questions about resilience, or if you want to share something, don't hesitate to do that.
And we'll also look at the chat as well. So if people type in the chat, we'll address what you type. I'll jump in a little bit. I keep thinking of that Charlie Chaplin film, the one that he speaks in, where he's talking about we're not machines, we're not machine men with machine hearts, and it's like a plea to humanity. I really love that, especially in light of where we are now, where we're creating autonomous thinking, relatively sentient entities. Yeah, and networks and all kinds of things like that that are that now can compete with us, which also is going to be an interesting new dynamic to the already interesting dynamic of humanity having its issues with how it engages and interacts with itself. So there's going to be a new form of resilience that's going to come up, one synthetic and one organic. So there's going to be an interesting thing. So it just, for some reason, that came up for me when some of the conversations were being had.
Right on. Yeah, we're moving into an interesting world of the machine learning and machine presence that is going to be much more artificial as compared to what is natural. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not against the machines. I'm not going to go to war against the machines because I don't think that's the winnable war. But it's also my perspective that nothing is healthier than being natural. So the farther we move away from being natural, from being authentic and immersing ourselves in natural energies, the farther we move away from that, the more we create artificial discomfort that we basically are single-handedly causing ourselves. Now, nobody is going to do it. No, you can't point a finger anymore at somebody who's doing it to you. You essentially have to admit, okay, I'm doing it myself, and I have freedom of choice. How can we exercise this freedom of choice? That's going to be the most interesting question. Those people who exercise the freedom of choice in this context will be the ones who will have a greater quality of life and a greater amount of vitality. Those people who don't exercise the freedom of choice will suffer from lack of vitality and have a relatively low quality of life. They may have some trinkets to play with, but those trinkets are not going to make our lives higher quality. They're just simply distractions in many cases. We hope that they're going to improve our quality of life, and we think, oh, but this most modern computer or the most sophisticated AI, that's going to make all the difference. And then we realize it actually takes more time from our day to operate that machine, or what we think the AI is not as intelligent as we wished it would be. And so we basically end up giving ourselves more grief. It's always been this history. I think we'll keep on just repeating that history, and hopefully we will learn someday. If we don't, well, then maybe next civilization will come along and figure that out.
Maybe it's worth asking the question that, this really, for me, it brings up one of the things I've talked about a lot in my community, which is the Newtonian worldview, the worldview we suffer under, where everybody seems to believe that the world around them is actually solid and real and has nothing to do with their mind, their heart, their emotions, their consciousness, that they're completely separate things. Therefore, you have to believe in the objective material world in order to believe that you're the victim of something.
It's interesting that Newtonian is the word that has been thrown around, referring to Isaac Newton, but actually the main proponent of this approach wasn't him. Isaac Newton was, as a matter of fact, an alchemist. He wrote quite a bit on the subject of alchemy, but the main proponent of this dualism was René Descartes. So this is Cartesian dualism that got so indoctrinated into Western way of thinking that it's considered the norm.
Yes, even though it's been disproven by science 120 years ago. and steadily disproven ever since. And nevertheless, we cling to it. And most people are, well, I don't know if it's true to say, probably is. Most people are unaware to the extent that their own day-to-day way of thinking has been disproven.
Yes, in other words, we live in a world of illusion. As Buddha said 2,500 years ago, there's nothing new under this moon. And it's been going on forever. And I'm sure that before Buddha Shakyamuni, there were other enlightened masters or teachers who had more or less the same story, the same wisdom to share. That we live in the world of illusion. It's a dream in a sense. And we create our own suffering within this dream, single-handedly turning into a nightmare, not by doing something wrong, but actually by not realizing how much we are creating everything, including our own thoughts and our own illusions. And so we do have the freedom of choice, how to delude ourselves and to which degree. It's just simply, if we don't recognize that we have that freedom, we can't exercise it. So that's exactly what we're here for, to awaken at least a little bit the population of this planet Earth, to see if anyone gets the message. And if they do, kudos to them, and we invite them into our community of like-minded people. And I'm honored to have this small but powerful group as our community of like-minded people in our circle. And I want to thank you very much.